Up to this point, we've looked at how we can configure our VM in the Azure portal, but you might be asking yourself, how do I access my VM if I actually want to use it for something? Good question. So let's talk about that. If you want to remotely access your VM, you can use either Remote Desktop Protocol or RDP or Secure Shell Access or SSH. Now these are common ways to access virtual machines, whether they're running in Azure or not. And speaking of running in Azure, you can't remote into your VM unless it's running or started. If you stop your VM, you'll need to start it again before you can remote into it. Now, if you're using RDP or SSH to remote into your VM, as I showed you earlier, you'll need to ensure that the proper TCP port is open on your VM. For RDP, that's port 3389. For SSH, it's port 22. Now these are default ports, and if you're going to use RDP or SSH, I highly recommend you change these ports. You can change them in the operating system itself. Otherwise, you're leaving your VM open to attack by bad guys now. A better alternative to changing these ports would be to simply keep all ports closed and use Azure Bastion. This is an Azure service that makes it easy to remote into a VM without opening any ports or without installing any software. You can simply remote into the VM using your web browser directly from within the Azure portal. Now, how does this work, you might ask? Well, let's head back over to the Azure portal and have a look at how we can remote into a VM using Azure Bastion. So here's our old buddy, our old familiar VM VM2, and what we want to do is connect to this VM. So I'm going to use the connect option, which is right here on the menu, and when I click that, notice I have three different options. I have RDP, I have SSH, and I have Bastion. Right now I've got port 3389 open. We did that when we created the virtual machine. I could use RDP if I wanted to. I'm not going to. I'm going to use Azure Bastion. So I click on the Bastion option right here, and then I just simply click Use Bastion. I don't think there's a whole lot of training necessary for this step, so I'm going to click that. And what we see here is it's going to deploy Bastion, and it's going to do that for me automatically. It's going to deploy that into my network. So I'm going to click on Deploy Bastion. Now there is a small price for using Bastion price, meaning there is a small cost in money, but it's not a lot, and it is by far the most secure method, and the easiest and most convenient method for accessing a virtual machine remotely. So under the hood right now, there's some magic going on. Azure's creating a new subnet inside of my network, and it's creating a Bastion host in that subnet, which will allow the connectivity to take place. And so once you click on that button to deploy Bastion, you're going to have to wait a little bit of time for it to configure all that stuff and come up. So now we have our Azure Bastion deployed. Now what we need to do is specify the username and password that I specified when I created my virtual machine. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that now. And now I'm just going to click Connect. Now this is going to connect in my browser. It works with any HTML5 browser. So any modern browser that you're running, this is going to work with. So now in my case, I've got a pop-up blocker. So I'm going to go ahead and allow that, and let's just always allow that to work. And now we'll click on Connect again. So you can see already this is actually remote into my VM already. We're looking at the interface within that virtual machine. Now it's logging in. It's the first time I've ever logged into this VM. So it takes it a minute or two to build a profile and all of that kind of stuff. And now I'm remote into the VM. It's doing a little bit more work here, but I've already got the user interface. It's now launching Server Manager, so I am now remote into my VM. And I didn't have to open any ports for this to happen. I did actually have 3,389 open, but I could close that, and this still works. Does not require ports to be open, does not require you to install any software, does not require you to do any kind of configuration. As you could see, it was really as simple as clicking a button, entering in my username and password and logging in. Now I will tell you when you deploy Azure Bastion the way that I did. It takes about 10 minutes for Azure Bastion to deploy. Now you didn't have to wait 10 minutes because I speed through that with video editing, but it does take a long time. So if you start that deployment and you're thinking to yourself, wow, something's not working right, this is taking a really long time. It's because it takes about 10 minutes. But once it finishes deploying, that's the only time that you have to go through that deployment method. So the next time I want to connect to this, I can just click the connect option in the portal, go to Bastion, enter username and password, click on connect, and I'm up and running on my virtual machine super easily. So that's how Azure Bastion allows you to remote into an Azure virtual machine.